I've heard you talk about how you'd like to. Well, I don't want to like misquote you or anything, but you would rather we not have a federal government. Is that right?
I would rather we abolish the state entirely, everywhere, all at once. I think that if you look at the vast majority of the problems that we encounter as human beings, in nearly every circumstance, the existence of the state exacerbates those problems greatly. I think that every criticism of what a stateless society might look at is always a current description of the status quo. Um, I think that if you remove the monopoly on violence that the state comes with, one of the things that makes it a state is its monopoly on violence. Um, you remove that, and people have to interact with each other, have to or voluntarily choose to. We realize how grossly expensive violence is, and it does become much more of a last resort. I think it would be vastly easier to figure out how we're going to provide energy for future generations. I think it would be vastly easier to figure out how we can feed people without wholesale destruction of planet, rainforest, etc. Because if we are kind of, you know, decentralizing uh uh government in general, dissolving government in general and decentralizing society, and be working towards a much more like federated existence instead of a federal system, then the need for like massive large scale agricultural operations where one area is responsible for feeding 1/5 of all citizens on the country, and that fifth of citizens don't even live in the area where the food is being grown. That's silly.
Right.
And unnecessary.
I mean, how do you achieve that though? How do you, is it like a gradual transition to that, or is it just like a boom, you gotta cut bait and just go immediately to a decentralized type of system? Because I mean, you're talking about 350 million cats that you're herding, right? That you're trying to, what do we do with all these people? How are we going to do it?
I would argue that 350 million cats don't currently live under what the system markets itself to be in the first place. I would argue that there are millions to tens of millions of people that operate almost entirely in a gray or black market setting, where they dip their toe into, society, have a limited amount of on paper existence where they have to. I would argue that decentralization has already taken place in a number of ways, and that there's a lot of different things that are on the horizon as prospects or concepts or ideas that are going to be driving more thought in this regard, no matter what I say. I'm just trying to plant a flag in here for maintaining some sort of human connection while we do it. In the three-dimensional space, I think a lot of it gets lost in the sauce and becomes more of a transhumanist, metaverse, crypto bro kind of conversation, and it makes me scream. Because I think we may be on the verge of losing what it means to be human beings, and that bothers me.
Yeah, in more ways than one. And I think our too much dependency on technology, which was birthed, several decades ago, I remember me coming up. It's like they were talking about the future, the computer this, computer that, boom, 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 the Internet of Things, that sort of thing. And but I grew up. Also, I grew up out in the country, and my dad, he was like jack of all trades. Taught us how to fix automobiles, taught us how to plant and grow food, and we grew a lot of food. We had a garden probably half the size of a football field, and there was only five of us, so we always had what we had. But then we would go around to like the family and friends, like people we went to church with, or like family members and stuff, and gave them part of our garden, and we still had a shit ton left over. And then cousins would do the same. They would go deer hunting every season, and they'd come around, and they'd bring us deer steaks and stuff like that. And that was the culture back in the 70s, at least through the 80s, that I remember that culture. And I'm thinking, what if that, coronal mass ejection hits Earth and we're all fucked, and we don't have our little gods to worship in the palm of our hands. And I'm not talking about that God, I'm talking about the electric God. Anyway, what happens then? And people don't know these basic skills that we had just 40 years ago. What's going to happen then?
Well, I think that's kind of what's being counted on, is guaranteeing that kind of dependency. This is what did James Lindsay, the guy that everybody's currently mad at me for having a perfectly rational conversation with the other day, and he called it the long march to the institutions. This sort of gradual dumbing down of America through the educational systems in the government schools. Now, that Lindsay calls it communism or Marxism, with their Rockefeller schools, it's a Rockefeller education system. Now, you can identify it. To me, the shape of the hat of the totalitarian is the least important part. It's that no matter what, all of their problems are solved with, oh, well, we'll just exterminate this entire class or group of people. That's what I have the problem with. Like the rhetoric that leads up to that, fucking okay. Neat. All right. Yeah. Have your go fucking jerk each other off on theory until it's time to fucking pick up a gun and exterminate people, because that's in your fucking book too. Every single time. Every single time.